There's a lot in it. Something for everyone.
Hello? Hello?
Okay.
Hello?
So, for example, people who are in OT, for them, the OT security, IoT security, hardware, banking, so many areas are there, right? Technology, business. And also, we'll be launching some excellent reports. So, please do go through them, India reports and all that, GCCs and all. Please do not miss them. Continue to look at the agenda, and you should surely target the ones which are of your interest. Okay. So here's the session being brought by Target.
Okay.
An excellent session, I should say, that it should be of interest to everyone who is involved.
Now it's working?
I hope everyone is settled in. Yeah. So there's no better way really than to start this. Sorry, I'll just.
Hello? Hello?
There is nothing really
Thank you.
of bigger topical interest than incident response, because as they say that we are putting all security measures in place, but what if an incident should happen? Then what is the connection between endpoint security and incident response? Okay, as they say that it takes years to build a reputation and few minutes to destroy it. So that is what is going to happen if you do not respond to incidents properly. And as they say that there are only two kinds of organizations that have been attacked and the ones that are yet to be attacked, are about to be attacked, cyber attacked. And then they say that there is a third category of organizations, the ones that do not know that they have been attacked. Okay, so anyway, all the jokes apart, what's going to happen is there are a series of hits or ramifications once an incident happens, starting from and all new ones getting introduced every year, whether it is a certain directions that you need to respond or report the incident within 6 hours, or it is the DPDPA regulations, in which there are heavy penalties for losing personal data and information. And then there is the angle of cyber insurance as well, right? So, and of course the larger ever-present one of the reputation and the fact that how will you bring up your operations, how will you, deal with the contractual clauses with the vendors, third-party contracts, and also the future contracts that you're going to draw up. So all of these things you'll need to contend with when you have an incident on your hand. And endpoint. What is the role and relevance of the endpoint here? In a boundaryless organization, in a perimeterless organizations, they say that identity is really your perimeter. And then people can access through endpoints that are anywhere. BYOD, work from anywhere, all these have become the norm after pandemic. Okay. So this is going to get into a work culture, as each one of us is operating on several endpoints, not merely probably have a laptop, a tab, a mobile phone, and so on. And tomorrow's endpoints could be even more sophisticated and different. With the 5G coming in, IoT is going to play a role, all of these things are there. So with that in mind, we can get, you can't get a better organization than Target to talk about all of these, because they are into many of the areas which we mentioned. They deal with hundreds of vendors. They have a massive operations running. They are a globally distributed organization, and also that they have various engineering centers. We have an excellent engineering center in Bangalore, and they are into the cloud. There are so many aspects in which they are running the operations throughout, and they have very good practical experience out of that. So they are in the perfect position to talk about this. And we have this wonderful team from Target, Ajish, Anita, Sridhar, and Visagan. Can you all come onto the stage, please? Yeah. Visagan. And who else? Ajish, yeah. Ajish, please. So they are the champions really who will walk us through the rest of this session. And where they start off, they have, I think, put in a tremendous amount of, they have experience and effort into preparing this program and also based on their experience in Target. Give them a big hand before they start. Okay, so over to you. So I'm signing off by a little bit about myself. I'm Sriram, Dr. Sriram Birudavolu. I head the DSCI Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at Hyderabad. We conduct a lot of programs and we'll be happy to conduct one for you, connect with you. We incubate over 40 cybersecurity and privacy startups there and engage with many, many things, including government, academia, corporate, and user groups, and run many international programs as well. So very happy to bring you this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Sriram, for setting up the context, right context on the Cybersecurity Symphony. So as a group, you already introduced our team. So myself, Sridhar, Director, Endpoint Security Target, and my colleagues, Ajish, part of Endpoint Security, and Anita, part of Incident Response team. Okay, I know most of you know about Target, but those who don't know about Target, so Target is a general merchandise retailer in US, having more than 1,950 stores across US, and headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we have a global capability center in Bangalore. And coming the cybersecurity program, right? In Target, we have 3 pillars in cybersecurity program: cyber solutions, cyber defense, and cyber risk. Cyber solutions provide all the engineering solutions to the cybersecurity program, and we have different products aligned to cyber solutions. There are different products aligned to cybersecurity solutions: IAM, identity access management, endpoint security, and vulnerability management. We have product security covering SaaS, DAST, pen test and SCA, and we have key certification management and the token vault exchange. These are the different products aligned to cyber solutions. The next one is the cyber defense. We have different products aligned to cyber defense: incident response, CSERT, TDO, threat detections and operations. We have red team and the fraud and abuse teams, and also we have the enterprise incident management roll up to the cyber defense. The last one is the cyber risk. We have regulation programs running out of compliance and regulation programs, starting with SOX, PCI, GLBA, HIPAA, and also the BISO organization, where is a consulting for supporting all the different business units in Target. In today's agenda, we are covering evaluation of threats, basically in the endpoint security space, and also the emerging threats. Ajish is going to cover up on some of the challenges and solutions that we have in endpoint security protection space, and Anita is going to cover some of the use cases, real-time use cases, where the endpoint protection team and the incident response team work with great collaboration and partnership to resolve some of the incidents. Before diving into the workshop, I would like to share a small story. So once a passenger onboarded into a bus, asked the conductor for 2 tickets. Then the conductor replied saying, okay, why you need 2 tickets? Because you already, 1 passenger traveling, why you need 2 tickets? Then he responded, as a backup, I need 1 more ticket. Then the conductor responded, okay, if you miss both the tickets, what next? Then he told, I have a monthly bus pass as well. So the conductor again replied saying, okay, what next? If you miss monthly bus pass, what next? So the passenger face is blank. The theme of the story is, basically, we can't eliminate the risk 100%, but we can reduce the probability and impact of the risk by having effective security controls across all the layers, starting from network, going to the email, endpoint, and application level. As the threat landscape is emerging, we need to all the 3 pillars, right? Technology, process, and people have to work together to ensure that these security controls are built effectively and work as a team to have the right visibility in place, right prevention in place, detection in place to respond the incident faster. Just want to give that an example, and I will hand over to my colleague Ajish to go through some of the endpoint security evaluation and threats, and also some of the challenges that we are facing. Thank you. Thanks for everyone, and Target Group is sitting as a group here. So post the session, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We will be able to clarify and we can have more insights and best practices shared within the group. Thank you.
Thank you. This. Sridhar. Sridhar.
So, hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ajish. I'm a lead engineer in the endpoint security space at Target. Thanks, Sridhar, for the, setting that context and gave a very good example of how we can reduce the risk, try to bridge that gap as much as possible, have the right solutions in place, and still there is an element of risk. It's never 100%. So here, our effort is we are trying to explain how better we can bridge that gap in the endpoint security engineering space and incident response, and how we can contribute each other instead of working as in a silo. Have a better communication that keep that channel active, and understand the requirement, understand how better we can keep help the incident response team, and bridge the gap as much as possible. So with that, we are going to go through the evolution of endpoint threats. If you look at over the last 10 to 15 years, and we can always look even beyond that, but we are trying to focus on that specific period especially. And also, we will be talking about some of the emerging threats. If you look at by 2030 what we can expect. And also my colleague Anita is going to talk about some of the real interesting cases, examples. So with that, this slide doesn't need much explanation. All of us are familiar with these legacy type of threats, virus, worms, and Trojan or whatever. You all are familiar with that. And even either as an antivirus administrator or as an end user, you would have come across various situations, right? So, if you are, if you want to raise your hand, I wanted to really see the people who have experienced maybe all of a sudden you are working on your laptop and you see that all your files and folders are disappearing from the laptop. So have you come across any of those kind of scenarios? If you would like to raise your hand. Yeah, or I'll give one more example. You have a lot of folders in your system. All of a sudden, the folder names are appearing with a .exe extension. Or maybe you connected your USB to a laptop, and immediately you are seeing something wrong happening on your system. So what I'm trying to say is, it's all was really disruptive, and it is not allowing you to work perfectly. And it was not so targeted like the advanced threat, but you could really understand that there is something wrong happening. It was not so stealthy. You can see that there is something wrong. There is a threat or a malware in your system. And it may be through the emails, or it may be through a USB drive. It may be a data you copied from some other location. It may be a bundled software you downloaded and installed on your system. Those were the familiar vectors. So if you think about the mitigation approaches at that point in time, right? It's all were definitely based on the pattern-based updates. We get the updates from the vendor, it gets downloaded to an endpoint, and then either real-time scanning or the scheduled scan running, detecting these threats and all that. So definitely it's a reactive approach. And I'm sure you can remember the situations when you were expected to submit a lot of samples to an anti-malware vendor. And then they understand that, learn about it, and then they release the signature for the mitigation of that. So that was actually mostly the scenario with the legacy threats, right? So if you look at the very basic architecture we had at that point in time, it's all about you have a management server set up somewhere in the environment, it's on-prem, you have a basic database and a threat intel, which is actually feeding this management server, and you have agents deployed across the environment. And when we say threat intel, we don't have to think too much we don't have to compare it with the advanced architecture where we have a lot of information there. In the olden days, it's all about just the reputation database we maintain probably somewhere, and we look at the file and file reputation, etc., and then detect some amount of unknown threat also based on reputations. So that was, if you think about the basic architecture of AV solutions at that point in time. And when we talk about advanced threats, the main thing we wanted to threat is, it's very, very focused and well-targeted attacks. Maybe it's actually aiming at data exfiltration or financial gain, or maybe damaging the reputation of an organization. So those are we can see the key objectives, or even disrupt the business to a great extent, right? So these are some of the key objectives if you think about the advanced threats. And if you think about vectors, we wanted to touch upon the phishing campaigns, first of all. Here we are actually connecting it to a later section where the end user awareness, or educating the end user how it is important, and actually that you can connect it with the phishing campaigns that are happening, tricking the end user to click on something or download something, etc. Now also we know that the attacker is getting the credentials from the environment, or maybe some social engineering tactics, etc. And then of course the vulnerable applications, or and then the zero-day vulnerabilities. That that was the buzzword, and you all are familiar with that. And many organizations or the vendors came up with what's the best approach we can have to mitigate zero-day threats, etc. So these all were the key vectors at that point in time. And if you look at the advanced threat, their key behavior, if you can talk about a couple of those things, of course it is the attacker use various techniques. Maybe it's a fileless malware, and it not necessarily dropping something into the hard disk where traditional AV can detect, right? So it's mostly stealthy. And another key important area is the abuse of genuine operating system components. There is nothing malicious to detect traditionally. It's all part of the operating system. The component is very legitimate, but at the same time, the attacker can abuse that, maybe to remain persistent, or maybe they attack the system and establish C2 or whatever. That's another key behavior we are seeing with the advanced threats. So the mitigation part, maybe detection, prevention. In many sessions today also we spoke about all those areas. But I want to draw your attention to the visibility part of it, very importantly, because we are going to actually talk about that in the later slides. And why it is so important when we are connecting and talking in relation to the incident response also. And then the end user awareness is very key. We already spoke about that. That's very important when it comes to the mitigation part of it. Now today, in the previous sessions, we were talking about the EDR solutions, wherein probably we were getting that feed or events collected from mainly the various type of endpoints, and how better we are correlating them, analyzing them, have a prioritized approach to actually detect and respond to those threats. So we actually gone through that EDR kind of solutions already. And if you, in the place of just endpoint events, if you're actually stitching together various inputs from the network side, from the email side, various points, from the maybe from the cloud resources, if you are actually collecting events from all these multiple sources, correlating them, and that's where we are talking about the XDR solutions also nowadays, right? So if you look at the architecture that is in place right now, mostly the organization have the SaaS hosted or the cloud hosted platforms where a lot of intelligence are fed in, and it is doing a lot of machine learning components and the cloud lookup to identify the threats, and a lot of sandboxing capability. Maybe solution which is capable of sending some or uploading something which it came across very newly, and analyze them, sandbox that, detonate it, and identify it, and come up with the solution to that one. And then of course it's still the agent-based solutions with a cloud UI, and this is, if you look at overall at a very high level, the advanced the EDR platform looks like. So I would pause here if you have any question. I know it's a familiar topic might be, but just wanted to pause here if you have any questions. Sure. So moving on. So here we spoke about all these areas right now. So if you look at from the basic AV where a single layer was there, an anti-malware component, very basic antivirus solution, which is definition-based. From there, moving on, the organizers started talking about defense in depth and the layered security approaches where, the endpoint protection platform started having multiple layers instead of a basic AV layer. It used to have the application control, the host IPS, and then the network protection components, etc. So actually, it was helpful in terms of detecting known and to a great extent the unknown threats. And then the EDR solution, which we spoke about already with key threat hunting capabilities. And then, also we will connect it with the visibility later, the custom prevention capabilities, that is very important. Even if there is not available by default with a product in terms of detecting something, there is always a possibility that, we can write some custom rules and detect something from the environment that is of our interest. And then the XDR solution, we spoke about event correlation and detection. And then what we can expect in the future. So we can expect more AI, ML-based solutions in the future. And if I can talk about three key things there, it's all about speed, and it's all about continuous learning, and also it's all about the automated responses instead of a lot of manual intervention. And then we spoke about the evolution of endpoint threats and also the respective antivirus solutions. So I would like to actually go to the ENISA report, which the European Union agency that for cybersecurity, the report which they published towards the end of 2022, that talks about, they categorized about, more than 20 threats, that what we can expect if we talk about the emerging threats in 2030. And, there is an extract of that report is, they prioritize the top 10 threats, what we can expect in the future. So here, I would like to touch upon some of these key threats, what they mentioned. For example, if you look at the supply chain compromise of software dependencies. So how that is important is, in the current market, when we are talking about, the market is expecting very fast product deliveries. And, respectively, the supply chain system has to be very efficient. And the component-based programming, we can expect more where people are using the code, a lot of dependent components they might be reusing, they might be adding to it. You can connect it with the Log4j vulnerabilities. So just wanted to check with you, how much are you familiar with the Log4j vulnerabilities? If you can raise your hand, or if you would like to share some of your experience working on this specific kind of vulnerability, that we know it was actually affecting the component, the logging component, which was used in many of the applications. Sure. So that is one thing, we can expect that more in the future. And even if you look at in the current time, it's very important that, advanced disinformation campaigns. So we know the ongoing conflict between multiple countries, etc. There are politically motivated, well-targeted, the disinformation campaigns actually which are going on. We can expect that more and more in the future from the environment. And then, it is talking about more and more private firms coming up into the space travel, and we can see that a lot of satellite launches and activities and happening in the space. So as an emerging threat, we can expect the lack of analysis and control in the space-based infrastructure also. That is something we can expect in 2030. Then, the rise of hybrid threats. Again, in the ongoing multiple conflict, you can see that, the blending of traditional warfare and cyber warfare. So if you think about, the hybrid threats, that probably is some of the best examples we can see right now. And then I wanted to touch upon one more area, that is the AI-based threats, right? The AI abuse. And I just wanted to talk about one thing, that is, the deepfake, the AI-oriented deepfake techniques, what a threat actor can use and how it can abuse the facial recognition and things like that, and what we can expect more and more in the future. So I'll stop here if you have any questions regarding this. Sure. So moving on, this is one area we thought of, based on the experience or what we have seen from the industry. Many organizations, what they talk about, the challenges of maintaining the health of various security agents across endpoints. We talk about the incident response process, how matured it is for an organization, and how well we can do that. But at the same time, some of the fundamentals, if that is missing, that can have, the point of attack for a threat actor. So here, in some of the cases Anita is going to talk about in few minutes, she will talk about that, how important it is, address those challenges and address those gaps, reduce those gaps between the security engineering space and the incident response. So it becomes more and more effective. So we listed down some of those challenges in this endpoint security space. And we know that it's not only the challenge, it can be very environment specific, it can be totally different. So, please, you can also add to that one if you feel that it's worth talking about it, or, you would like to talk about some of the other or related challenges in this space. So we listed down few of them here. So first of all, we wanted to talk about the challenge many organizations are facing when it comes to various type of endpoint devices. Earlier, in the time of legacy threats, if we talk about only desktop laptops, now we need to think about various endpoint types, the smart devices, IoT, OT devices, the cloud resources. All these type of endpoints, it becomes really a challenge to find the right solution for all these type of endpoints, what is applicable to what, and then how better we can get the visibility from all these environments. If we are not able to readily detect something, how better at least we can feed that information to the incident response team, and how they can actually better perform the incident response in this area. So it is very key in this space that finding the right solution, identifying the gaps, and do the proper risk assessment, and come up with the right solution, and make sure that we have the visibility across all these type of endpoints to have a better control of the environment. And then here, of course, this is the remote and hybrid work environment where it's not necessary that the employees are connected only to the company or the corporate network. We are traveling across the hybrid environment. People are connecting to even maybe the open Wi-Fi networks, etc. So that threat landscape increased when people started moving around and connecting from various places and things like that. So one of the area probably we need to think about in this kind of scenario is the location aware or the location based or geo based or the situation based policies, and how better we can automatically detect from where the endpoint is connecting and what are the current controls in place, how we can elevate some of the controls in the environment. Maybe it is a form of two-factor authentication, or maybe it's a form of tightening the firewall controls on the endpoint and things like that. That becomes very important in this aspect. Now it's a bigger area, the applications, the vulnerabilities with multiple applications which we deploy to our endpoint, that always actually becomes a bigger challenge. If we don't maintain a proper inventory of the application in the environment, if we don't make sure that the latest version of the applications are installed on all the endpoints, and if patches are not applied on time, and then also if we don't have a control over the tools which we deploy to our machine, maybe a user on his own requirement, he might be downloading something and installing, or maybe a genuine tool we install on a system as part of doing our job, but that can be abused later by a threat actor. So there is one interesting case Anita is going to present in the coming slide, where she will talk about how threat actor can abuse some of those tools if you are not managing the installation of that perfectly, or at least have that visibility from the endpoint that such a tool is deployed, it's present, we need to control it. So it's very important to have that visibility from the environment. And then the feature parity of the security solution. That is another bigger challenge. multiple vendors or solutions talk about, we can protect at this level, we can have this capability, different layers, the memory scanning, and all these capabilities are available. But when we go deeper into it, they say that, there are some disclaimers we can see that, sorry, it's available only for this set of operating system. Or, it has a challenge when it comes to some of the legacy operating system versions. Or it has some, if you think about just desktop, laptop scenario also, it has some limitation, maybe the hardware or the device type kind of, limitations are there. So it's very important that, we select the right solution. And if we have a gap in our endpoint protection solution, how do we fill that gap with a compensatory control? It's not necessary that one single solution is giving us all the visibility, all the detection prevention capabilities, but at the same time, we can have a compensatory control in place that is giving us equivalent amount of visibility. End of the day, that all these events or information we are collecting, it can go to some SIM solution, we do some correlations, identify that there is something wrong even if the traditional endpoint protection is not giving us that information. Then another bigger challenge, I don't need to talk about that because, I'm sure we would have come across the resource utilization problems in our organizations at various stages. So any of you wanted to, if you can list down 2 or 3 cases or, anything of that sort, where you faced a resource utilization problem with your machine. So I'll touch upon some of them. When we talk about multiple endpoint controls, the requirement of deploying various agents, putting a lot of custom policies in place, loading up the endpoint with a lot of solutions, we need to find that right balance that, we have all these controls in place, which is very good, but we are not affecting the system in terms of memory and resource utilization. We are not, hammering it with a lot of agents. So it's very important you find that right balance. Make sure the agents are not conflicting each other. And it's very important we test and we look at the system utilization, fine-tune our policies, we deploy to the to the environment, so that it is not actually affecting the endpoint to a great extent. So which is very important. And then of course the end user experience, you can link it with the phishing campaigns, which are actually happening. The end user, if not, I'll come back to that. The end user experience is when we load multiple agents into an endpoint. It's not that, you should not be adding too much of friction to the end user. If it is asking too much of two-factor authentication related, or maybe, if it is blocking so many applications on the endpoint, or it is actually blocking a lot of network communication. While you are working, you are feeling that disruption on the endpoint because somebody put a very strict firewall rule in place on the endpoint. It is not allowing you to work perfectly. So we need to consider that or think about that right balance where we don't actually to a certain extent we are helpless, but to what extent possible we should think about the user experience when we are putting all these controls in place. So now a couple of challenges we thought we will actually separate it out. In addition to the challenges we have seen earlier, couple of things we will split it out because actually it is worth talking or having a more focus on this area. So if you think about the asset inventory, many organizations are facing this problem. It's always the fundamental component or the fundamental area in the endpoint security space. If we don't manage a proper inventory of the assets we have in the environment, it's not about desktop, laptop, all the endpoints we have in the environment. If you don't have that information, the remaining things I'm going to talk about now, it's all actually building on top of that. So let's talk about the monitoring and reporting of the health status, the compliance status, coverage status, all of them. If you don't have a proper inventory, how do you find that that master data which says, okay, you have these many endpoints spread across the environment, and out of that, this is your compliance or a security posture, right? So that's very important. And then, related to remediation, any of you would like to talk about, if you have implemented any of the end-to-end automated remediation process in your environment. The endpoint remediation, when it comes to the health issues of agents or remediating them. Any of you wanted to talk about that? Sure. So here, the challenge is the operational overhead and the manual effort and time required actually to remediate various agents, on the endpoints, the type of endpoints we have in an organization. More than remediating them, identifying them in the first place. That is actually very, very difficult if you don't have a proper inventory in place. And also, if we think about how do we address it better, I already spoke about the need of having a proper asset inventory. The second thing is how better we can automate it end to end. No manual intervention needed. Identify the endpoints automatically. Identify what is the problem. Apply the right solution and report the status. So it's actually like, it will reduce a lot of operational overhead. At the same time, you can see that a very good compliance level or a health status is being maintained properly, consistently across the environment. That's actually probably something an organization definitely should have. And definitely having a proper inventory in place will always help us to detect the unmanaged assets, which is actually lying somewhere. It may be a legacy endpoint, or it may be like, the endpoint which is actually deployed by an administrator separately, which doesn't have any of the security agents in place. That can become a target of an attack. Doesn't matter how strong the security posture of an organization, it is very important to have, identify the unmanaged asset that is actually on the network. So, before coming into this bigger area, any other challenges you wanted to talk about, or any of you felt like I missed talking about it when it is coming to the endpoint protection space? Sure. So moving to the next one, the visibility gap. So if you remember, I touched upon in the previous slide, we just spoke about visibility. So the whole effort through all this slide was actually to make sure you have the right component, right agents, right health status, everything actually is in the organization. And that actually is going to give a much better visibility to the incident response team in terms of identifying the threat and remediating them on time. So if you don't have a proper health and proper coverage, and if we are not maintaining, that posture across the organization, if the endpoint security and the incident response symphony is not there properly, then how it can affect an organization? So that's actually like, it can lead to serious visibility gaps. Maybe in the era of advanced threat, visibility is very, very important. We are not actually like expecting anything to be known. There are, the unknown threats more than the known components. You may not be realizing that something is running on your system. On a funny note, maybe if the attacker was disrupting the endpoints earlier, maybe the attacker is saying now, run your system properly. I want to deploy my tool and exfiltrate the data peacefully. So the tone has changed, right? It's not necessarily disruptive, not necessarily the presence is not felt. But at the same time, there is a persistent threat. There is something actually which is taking out the data. So it is very important to have that visibility and all that information fed into a SIEM solution and have the correlation in place. So this is what I actually wanted to talk about, and in the upcoming slide, Anita will be taking you through some of the very interesting cases. That is actually, you can link it back easily with all these topics we spoke about. So I'll pause here before I finish my talk. Any questions if you have? Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Anita. I am a lead analyst with the CSERT team at Target. I'm going to be walking you through some use cases, but I do want to mention this is a generalized use case and not related in any way to just the cases we see at Target. So you all listened to Ajish talk about all of that wonderful information on how threat has evolved and how our tools have also evolved with the threats over the years. We have gone from just signature-based detection, we've gone to heuristics, and then to automated scanning, automated sandboxes, and we have AI and ML-based solutions right now. But working in an incident responder position itself, I can assure you that sometimes even we can have everything, but that is still not enough. We still face challenges on a daily basis, something like visibility. Ajish talked a lot about visibility, but still there are some sections of the network that we do not have enough visibility into. And there can be devices in the network that we do not have visibility into. And a very important topic in cybersecurity itself is a very known skills shortage. Even if you have all of the logs, there are not enough people who can understand the logs that they can find the threats easily. And the last one that I want to talk about is actually the most important element, but also the most unpredictable. Anyone wants to take a guess what it is? Okay? The human element, which is the end user. Like you can have ironclad security, top-notch tools and everything, but you can never predict with 100% possibility what an end user will do when they are faced with a threat. So I am going to be talking about how incident response team and other teams, including endpoint threat detection, can work together to make sure we are able to handle those sophisticated threats. We are going to be looking at 3 use cases. The first one is stored, the shadow that's lurking within our detections. The second one, we are going to be looking at a solution called Strelka, which is a tool that we can use to defend attacks like Toad. And the next one, we are going to be seeing HID USB attacks, which is a very niche type of attack, and it has a very low detection possibility. I'll explain why. And at last, we're going to be seeing RMM tools, which are infamous cyber barnacles. Why? Because RMM tools can be used for legitimate purposes, but they are also abused by attackers. Okay, the first one, Toad. Toad usually refers to a telephone-oriented attack deliveries. I'm sure at least some of you would have seen it. It is comparatively new to phishing emails. Like this is like, what, a year or two we've been seeing these Toad emails. So what essentially is a Toad email? It is essentially, well, an email, but it contains a fake invoice with a very high price to a product that you purchased or a subscription that you made. Usually, it is a fake invoice. And what has happened is, compared to previous phishing emails, these emails do not have links or attachments. Rather, they have a phone number that you can call to. So what the attacker has done here is, they're moving the initial attack vector from an email to a voice call. Why would they do that? And why is it important that we talk about it here? Because when we consider emails, emails are one of our largest initial attack vectors and one of our highly monitored. We have so much detection set up with emails that we can thwart them at least like 70% probability. There's never 100%, so at least say 70%. But with Toad emails itself, they have moved from this particular detection and moved on to a voice component, which cannot be monitored. Maybe you can monitor your voice calls, I'm not sure. But what if the user were to call using their personal number? This means you have zero visibility into what has happened, and there's also zero detection chances in this particular case. So what happened when we first started seeing these Toad emails? Like I mentioned, these are only like a year or two old, and these did not conform to any of the previous phishing emails that we were seeing. So what happened is these emails were getting delivered, and that is not the most ideal solution. The problem is that we wanted to make sure that emails never get delivered. Because like I mentioned, once the email gets delivered and the user calls the number, we don't know what happens. So we are going to be looking at the first part of the threat chain itself to see what we can do to stop those emails. The first thing to do was our tools. We already have a defense-in-depth approach. I'm sure all of you have defense-in-depth approach for emails, right? But all of them might be failing because the detections we had set up are set up to look into links and attachments and not just plain text. Even if it is plain text, what are you going to be looking for? It just contains the same thing that you might see in hundreds of spam emails and a telephone number. So what are you going to be setting detections up for? In this case, tools were failing, our detections that were in place are also failing. So we have to move to a more primitive approach. Primitive approach in the sense scoping for emails. There was a difficulty here as well because with stored emails itself, you can predict they come from different sender email addresses and the subjects are different and the content in the email is also different. So we had to pull multiple emails and look into all of the patterns in them and maybe do some pattern recognition, write detections on top of that till the tools catch up. There are tools now that can defend these type of emails, like they have been developed over the year or two, but still they don't have 100% possibility of catching all of these emails. So while we were still working on the pattern recognition, the threat actor had already evolved. That's why I wanted to talk about these stored cases, because they are a testament to how threats can evolve while you're still working on them. So only a couple of weeks into your fancy detection and regexes, and you were thinking that everything was being stopped, the threat actor had evolved and they had moved on to what is essentially this. This is an example of what a stored email looks like. You can see it is a billing information. You have a purchase for $219 for this particular McAfee Secure. But what you see different is that it has a phone number. You usually do not see this in like previous phishing emails, but this is a stored email that we are talking about. And one thing that was different in this particular email is that they had moved on from plain text emails to images. So this means all of the detections that you had written and all of the pattern recognitions that were done using the raw form of the email were starting to fail again, which meant these emails were getting delivered again and again. So if you were an incident responder, I'm sure some of you might have faced this situation. Anyone wants to take a guess or provide a solution as to what you might do if you're facing a situation like this? Okay. So the answer would be an optical content recognition scanner. What an optical content recognition scanner can do is it can extract the text from an email and it can put it in plain text, that way enriching the details that are already present about the email, and this can make sure that your detections that you worked on earlier can still successfully happen. And I wanted to introduce a solution called Strelka. This is a homegrown solution by Target and it's also open source. This is a container-based scanner that works in real time. You can feed it the email and Strelka will be able to extract the information from the images and enrich the email information that you might already have. Apart from the OSIA scanner, Strelka can also do file analysis, file identification. It has over 40 types of scanners, and of course, the unique support of extracting text from images, and it can also do Yara hashing against the files that you submitted to. Sorry. And this is an example of how Strelka can work with an email that contains an image. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the more commonly seen phishing type of emails. So what it happens is, in this particular case, there's an email with an Excel attachment that contains a macro, but only it has an image saying what to do with it. So Strelka's OCR scanner, which is one of the capabilities of Strelka, will be able to extract all of the content and save it in a JSON format. This JSON format then can be used to enrich your email details that you already have, and it can be used for both detection, IR, hunt, and everything else. Now, why I wanted to talk about this stored use case is, this can be considered one of the best case scenarios when it comes to incident response. Why do I say it's best case? Is because the logs are already there, and there's also enough common knowledge about emails itself that you are able to work quickly to develop a solution that you can, in a matter of weeks, stop these type of attacks. But we are going to be looking at two more types of cases, and I cannot say they are the best case scenario. And the next one that we are going to be seeing are HID USB attacks. Anyone has heard about these type of attacks before? No? Okay. But we all know what HID USB devices are? Okay. We might actually know what these devices are. We might not know what these names mean. HID devices are human interface devices, which refer to our keyboards, mouse, our webcams, and everything like that. And well, a USB is a USB. So when I say HID USB, I'm talking about USB devices that your keyboards and your mouse that are based out of USB. But when I talk about HID USB attacks, I'm not talking about the attacks that can be performed with, well, maybe a keyboard or a mouse. I don't think there's anything that happens with just that, but rather I'm talking about a programmable USB device that can be used to emulate a keyboard or a mouse. Excuse me. So what am I talking about here? So this is a programmable USB device that looks just like your flash drive, but when you connect it to a computer, it rather behaves like a keyboard or a mouse. So how does that happen? So what happens when you actually connect a USB to a computer? Any idea on how the computer detects the USB or how it makes sure that it functions properly? Okay. So when a USB is connected to a computer, it goes through this kind of handshake, where the computer requests the information from the USB, asking, tell me what type of device you are, so I can load the drivers and you can work properly. And so these information is sent from the USB to the computer in return. One thing that is a flaw in this type of handshake is that the computer is never able to verify if the USB is what it says it is. So when I connect this programmable USB and it says it's a computer, it's a keyboard, the computer is not able to recognize if it's actually a keyboard or pretending to be one. So this is the type of niche attack that's rarely seen but still exists in the wild. Okay, what do you do when you see these types of attacks? Like I mentioned, this is actually a programmable USB. What you can do is you can inject a malicious script or load it into this particular USB, and it will send out the whole script itself to the computer in the form of keystrokes. So even when you're looking at evidence, if to an untrained eye, this might actually look like a keyboard or a mouse. So this is one of the examples from one of the test cases that we did. Does anyone want to take a look at the last two devices that were connected and guess which is the malicious one and which is not? I'm talking about rows 3 and 4. Wild guess based on just the information that's here. Okay. Sorry? Last one, the fourth one? Actually, no, the first one. The third one is the malicious USB I'm talking about. So you can look at it here and you can see the information is almost same. You're seeing both of them is the input devices. You see VIDs and PID information being presented, and it says it's a HID USB, and both were plugged in at the same time. But if you consider the other rows as well, right, that's when you start to see why the third one might be a red flag. So you can see the VID and PID, which is the vendor ID and product ID of a USB itself. This is what the most discerning factor of a USB is. It helps us identify the USB itself. So if you look at it, all of the first 3 rows have the same vendor ID and the product ID. It was last modified at the same time. So probably this is the same device that we're looking at. But if you can see, the service that this particular USB has requested in all of these 3 rows is different. The first time it's saying it is a USB composite device. What is a USB composite device? Is a USB device that's capable of performing multiple actions. Like for example, when I mentioned your webcams, it can take both audio input and a video input. It's not like a singular input like a keyboard or a mouse. So that is what we are referring to as a USB composite device. And the next one is the LilyPad USB. And it says the service that it's requesting is a USB serial device. Anyone aware of LilyPad devices? Okay. LilyPad devices are usually the programmable chips that we are talking about that can be used to do hardware coding and perform multiple functions. So if you look at all three of the rows together, then you can kind of guess that the USB is not what it's saying it is. It is true in this particular case because this is a programmable USB that can be used to perform that type of attacks, which is called a VIT. And the next artifact that you can be looking at in the incident response perspective is the event ID 20001, which is for PNP driver installation. This event is recorded whenever a plug-and-play device is inserted into the computer, and it can give you details on the type of driver that was loaded for this particular USB. And the last one is, of course, 4104. When I talked about this USB, you could have noticed that it emulates a keyboard or a mouse, and it has very low chances of detection. When I talk very low chances of detection, I'm saying like very low, not even like 10% chances of detection. Why that happens is because this device does not act like one of the suspicious USBs that you might be looking for, but rather a keyboard or a mouse that is very prevalent in your network. And though we cannot detect the device itself, why I'm talking about event 4104, which is for a remote command, is this particular event ID is logged when a PowerShell command is executed on your computer to an internet-facing URL or an IP. Though the device itself is not detectable, there is actually a set path that this device uses to execute the malicious script, which is when you connect the USB, it opens up a run prompt, and then it opens up a PowerShell, and then it inserts whatever script that is there and executes it. So if we cannot detect it at the initial stages, setting up detection for this particular event ID can actually help us detect this type of USBs. Now, like in most cases when we are talking about detection and incident response, we do not get the devices that were connected to it on hand. But if you do get a chance at a USB like this, it will be useful for you to use the USB PCAP module in Wireshark to read more information about this device itself. This is not true just for these type of devices. Even normal USBs can be connected and you can study the information there. So do you remember that I mentioned there is a handshake process that goes through when we connect the USB to a computer? So this is the process I'm talking about. Wireshark will be able to very clearly catch that handshake that's happening through, so you might be able to read the device better. I'm not sure if it's very clear, but usually when you connect a USB to the system and you have the USB PCAP module of Wireshark running, you'll be seeing 6 packets that have this initial information about the USB handshake itself. And the packets that we are talking about are the get descriptor device request and response, the configuration request and response, and setting up the configuration. So this first image is the packet that captures the VID and the PID of the USB, which is the initial information the USB sends to the computer itself. And this can provide you the same information we saw before. And the interface descriptor, you can clearly see that the device says it is an HID. And the interface class is a HID device as well. And in the second image, there is an interesting feature that is not usually noted. It is the detail called as the B max power. So here, if you can see, it says it is 500 milliamps. 500 milliamps might not be a great power usage, but when you consider USBs itself, it is actually on the higher end. This is the test data from the programmable USB device itself, and you can see it is actually higher if it is for a flash drive. these amount of power consumption would make sense if it was a keyboard or a mouse, like a higher end keyboard or mouse where you have like all of those backlit technologies and everything. So this power consumption does not make sense if it is a flash drive. So, like I said, it has very low chances of detection itself, but there is something, is there a question? Sorry? Okay. There is something that we can do to maybe increase that power of detection itself. And the first one that I am suggesting is user awareness, because that's the most important component, as we talked about in the beginning of the session itself. When we educate a user and empower the user about the initial attack vectors that they might be seeing apart from phishing emails, we are actually preventing these types of attacks from happening in the initial stages itself. In which case, we do not have to worry about if it being detected or if we are able to respond to it properly. Next is creating a block list with a known VID and PID. VID and PID is a very important component when it comes to USBs. They are the IDs that can uniquely identify what a USB can do. So these type of devices are pretty common. You can search for them. You can search as bad USBs or HID USB attacks, and you might be able to compile a list of USBs that are known to perform this type of attacks, and you can use those the list of the VID and PID to create detections, so you are able to at least see what happens when something like this gets connected to the network. The next one is the restricting usage of admin. Like I mentioned, there is a particular flow at which this USB attack happens, and when they are in executing commands using PowerShell or any other shell, using admin access makes the process pretty much easy. So restricting these admin usage can actually restrict it to a little bit. And then this is a strict USB policies. It is a very unideal solution, but I still want to put it out here, which is banning all of the users in your network from bringing any peripherals, like any keyboards or mouses that is not provided by the company itself. But that is not an ideal solution, but I still wanted to bring it up here. So, like comparing to the first use case and the second use case, you can see why I would mention the first one is an ideal case scenario, right? Because the logs were there, the knowledge was there, you are able to do something. This scenario, not so much, because there are only a little bit of logs. There isn't as much common knowledge because this is a very niche type of attack that rarely happens. So in this case, when you are faced with a threat like this, there is a lot of digging you have to do to even start to understand what might have happened and then start responding to it. The next case scenario that we are going to be looking at is the RMM tools. I am sure everyone is pretty familiar with the image on the screen, right? I'm sure like everyone has seen this at some point. But this has also evolved a little bit in the past couple of months, or years, I might say. Like, we all know these browser pop-ups that come up saying a virus has been detected on your computer, and you have to download a specific cleaner or scanner to get all of these viruses away. But I remember Ajish was mentioning, he mentioned when the health monitoring section of his information that the attackers want to make sure that your system is still running properly to make sure they are able to do whatever they want to do. This is a similar case scenario. So what's happening right now is, instead of the attackers putting up a link for something to be downloaded, they're rather making you call a phone number. You can see in the middle of the image, there is a phone number that's highlighted. So what happens is the attacker is like, okay, I want to make sure this runs in your system, but I'm not going to leave it up to you. I'm going to make sure that I install this on your system personally. So what happens is when an end user looks at this type of attack, they get a pop-up saying there's virus on your computer and call this number so I can clean it up for you. You call the number and of course it's a threat actor in the other end. And what they do is they say, oh, I'm not able to see your computer and I need to have visibility into your system so I can clean it up for you. and they download what is known as the remote monitoring and management tools. You might have heard about these tools, but might not know they're called RMM. Anyone heard about AnyDesk, TeamViewer, or ConnectWise? Yeah. So that is the type of tools I'm talking about. We know they can be used legitimately. They are, of course, used for troubleshooting purposes, etc. But they can also be used maliciously this way. So what happens is the user calls the number, the attacker makes them download one of these applications onto their system, and now the attacker has hands-on keyboard on this particular machine. But also, what is the issue when this comes to incident response is, when there is a connection established between a user and an attacker, even though we have a lot of logging, sometimes we are not able to have visibility or predict what happened in that call between the attacker and the user itself. Why? Because logs are not enough. When we talk about logs itself, the Windows event logs or anything, we can always detect these types of tools were installed on the system itself, but we do not know what is happening on those calls. Sorry. So there are app logs to each of these applications, but as you may know, there are multiple types of RMM tools. I only listed AnyDesk, TeamViewer, ConnectWise. There are tens of other tools that are there, and we never know which tool the attacker might install on the system, which means we cannot set up detections for it, neither can we set up logging for it. And if you look at the examples in these two itself, you can see they are set up in different locations of the computer, and the type of information they provide can also be different from each other, which means there is no reliable way of creating a detection that might be able to detect all types of RMM alerts on a user system. Even if we captured all of these app logs, right, you can see the type of information that you can capture from these. It will usually be the host name that connected into your network, or the IP address from which they connected, or most possibly how long the call has happened. But you will never know what actually happened in the call itself. Like, for example, if an attacker put a file in the user system, you will not be able to see that. If information was exfilled into another system, you will still not be able to see that. These are some of the challenges that we face as incident responders when it comes to these type of use cases. And in the similar way, I do want to suggest these detection and response, but I cannot confirm that these will work 100%. So the first one I'm talking about is detection and block. This can be done both by your detection teams and your EDR teams. It is a combined solution that you can try. This is the most defense-in-depth approach. I'm going to be starting with network communications. Network communications is when you can identify all of the legitimate sources from which these applications can be downloaded and put up network blocks for these, but they can fail if an attacker chooses to host that particular application in a file share or in a different domain. Then this network communication fails, and that's why we want to also put up detection for file creation, which is when the file gets downloaded to the system itself. When a file gets downloaded to the system, we can set up detections based on the path that it gets downloaded to or the installation path that it does. But this, again, can still fail, because if I do change the name of the file or the hash of the file, still this file creation detection can fail. And that's why we're going one step further and creating a process creation as well. Process creation can, of course, be done on your Windows event logs as well, but a most probable solution will be to look into your EDR to check for signs of tools that might be used for connections like this and putting in a process creation block. But the problem with this is, like I mentioned with the other two, this might also fail because there is a no 100% foolproof solution for all of these. So the last thing I would suggest again is user awareness. Why I want to suggest user awareness again and again is we all do user awareness campaigns in the month of October. But when we talk about user awareness, we are talking mostly about phishing emails, but rather there are these complex cases that have evolved recently, and we should be talking more about it to the user as well. Because it's not just about protecting the enterprise, but it's also about protecting the individuals. Like, we do not want anyone to lose money or information because they are not aware of these type of scams. And that actually brings me to the end of the case studies today. I am going to conclude with the takeaways, but before that, I wanted to see if there are any questions. Okay. So again, for like the nth time in this particular presentation, user awareness, I talked about it, Ajish talked about it, but it's the same thing. When you can empower a user to be conscious of these type of threats that are evolving, you can stop these threats in the initial phases itself, which means it makes work less awful for us. And then access controls, the same thing I talked about in the previous cases, restricting the usage of admin accounts and making sure you have multi-factor authentications. Social engineering, it ties up back to user awareness itself, but we are going to be talking more about the data policies, how data can be shared, and what are the different cases where you can actually lose data, and strong security culture. This is actually the emphasis of the whole presentation itself. There is incident response, there is endpoint team, but if we do not work together with detection and intelligence and all of the other teams, then security effort cannot be a successful one. And we would also, like, incidents do happen. There's no way of saying, like, incidents do not happen at our environment at all. Maybe the incident was not successful, like they didn't reach exfiltration, they didn't reach the last stages. But incidents do happen. What is helpful is running an after actions report after every incident. So we try to identify where we failed or what happened or what caused it to fail. That way we can identify and patch those things before we are faced with another threat. And next, about tooling itself. I know we talked a lot about tooling in the first half of the session. We have EDRs, we are moving to XDRs. We also talked about Strelka. So adaptive tooling is the most important part, and also educating your users or your incident responders or your security team on the tooling itself is important, because if your users do not know how to use the tool, then there's no use of having everything. And with that, I conclude this presentation. We are opening up to questions. If there are no questions, I think we can close this. Okay? Thank you. Examples, I have read articles about how browser extensions themselves can be used for malicious purposes. One thing we could suggest is blocking all browser extensions and allowing only that is essentially needed. But then that is not an ideal solution, because users are going to download anything they want. Setting up some type of detections, like you can always get a list of IOCs that are like malicious browser extensions that have already been identified to be malicious, and you can use that to set up detections to make sure, at least if they do download it, you have some type of detection so you can go and remove it for them. But there's no, I don't think there's a possibility where we can stop users from downloading them in the first place.
But are there solutions which take care of the logs of these browsers and how the extensions work, or take care of that?
So we spoke about the custom prevention, detection and prevention. So even if, maybe as a vendor product, they don't want to block all the extensions, right? There are a lot of users, for them it's very useful. But there are ways, if as an organization we feel that it is not necessary, there are unique IDs where we can actually have custom rules defined, and we can decide whether it just want to detect or we want to prevent it. So that is possible.
Thank
I
you.
hope this answers. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Alok Purohit from Power Grid this side.
Good
So
afternoon.
the
first question is that what about in-memory attacks?
Sorry?
In-memory attacks.
I didn't get you.
So in-memory attacks means if a malicious
Okay.
code happen inside that memory, how we can analyze that?
Okay, I can actually answer that offline for you because that's not related to the presentation unless anyone else has any questions.
Yeah, I would like to add one thing to what Anita just mentioned. You can have the memory scanning in place with, it is linked to the ARA rules. You can identify those patterns actually in the memory scanning. And there are ways actually, you can use, not necessarily the typical endpoint protection solution, but there are complementary controls wherein you can have the memory scanning. But at the same time, I wanted to mention that it's not possible. I spoke about feature parity. That's a bigger challenge here. What you are able to achieve in Windows may not be possible in Mac because the vendor is tightly locking the operating system. But it is technically feasible, at least to some.
Yeah, and also it might require a lot of resource utilization when
Yeah,
we are talking
yeah.
about memory scanning itself. And we have to check how it goes in an enterprise. It depends on how big your enterprise is.
And one more point would like to add that we can also have that registry monitoring. Any changes in the registries, that also we can.
Yes, you can actually set up detections for registry modifications, but there are registry modifications when you install something or connect something to a computer. So they do get complicated, but you can study use cases more and more and can set up registry modifications. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, Amir from HDFC Bank.
Yeah.
So, two questions. As a retail player, one of the largest retail players, what is your incident response strategy with your vendors or partners? That's the first question. Second, how are you utilizing endpoint security to identify custom applications which may be used as part of your daily BAU?
Okay. With vendors and stuff, I do not deal with this directly, so I'm not sure if I'm able to answer that question. But I think Ajish can answer the question with related endpoint.
Yeah, the role of target in getting involved with your third-party vendors as part of an incident response strategy.
Yeah, so one thing we can talk about, nowadays, if you look at the advanced solutions, it's not that we just consume it. We can also contribute to an extent that, what an organization is comfortable, to what extent we can share the information.
Correct.
So we can actually everything, every EADR solution, it has that extended set of logging. It also actually can look at those unknown executables and code it is coming across. Some amount of that information is actually fed to the cloud. So that can be utilized to identify it later. But one thing very careful is it has the potential to create a lot of false positive detections and problems. So we need to find that right path.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks, sir.
So my question is regarding the tool that you mentioned, Stelka. So was it does that tool detect QR code phishings as well?
Yeah, it can actually read QR codes and detect the URL that's present in there for you.
Okay.
It does have a scanner capability of that. You can read more about it. You can read it on Strelka's GitHub page.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay. I think that we're good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend the session.